As the prospects of world revolution dimmed, Fidel Castro turned his energies back toward transforming Cuban society. He set out to build communism in record time, faster than the Soviet Union, even China. Fidel would even try to mold a new man, selfless, dedicated, uncorruptible. There were some very real achievements. Children in Cuba did not go hungry. The sons and daughters of peasants and workers received a free education, one day becoming the engineers and doctors of revolutionary Cuba. Hospitals and clinics were built in the farthest reaches of the island, the foundation of a system that would eventually deliver health care to all Cubans. Prostitution and gambling virtually disappeared. But Cuba's socialist economy bordered on disaster. The U.S. embargo, the flight of managers and technicians to the United States, and economic mismanagement had left factories idle, store shelves empty, basic goods strictly rationed. La cola, the waiting line to purchase whatever was available, became the staple of daily life. Cubans called Fidel El Señor Habrá, Mr. There Will Be, and joked that if Spanish lacked a future tense, Castro would be rendered speechless. But Cubans could do little more than trade jokes. In Castro's Cuba, criticism was not permitted. There were no newspapers, except official ones, no books, except those sanctioned by the regime. Artists, hippies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses were labeled antisocial, rounded up, and sent to labor camps. Jails filled with prisoners, from those who simply spoke out against the regime to those who committed acts of violence.
They fight in the mountain. They think that I killed people.
Was that true?
I don't know. I don't believe it. I was judge in the tribunal.
Did you have a fair trial?
No.
There were thousands of political prisoners. Castro himself, in the mid-1960s, admitted to 20,000, which is already a staggering number. Already makes Cuba one of the highest, if not the highest, for per capita political imprisonment in Latin America's 20th century. The figure was probably closer to 40 or maybe even 50,000.
In March 1968, Castro moved to eliminate the last vestiges of capitalism in Cuba. He decreed all private businesses illegal. Street vendors, neighborhood cafes, shoe repair shops. Fixing a toaster in Cuba, one visiting economist remarked, has now become a matter of state.
He traveled in the 1960s constantly around the island, checking up on local managers and administrators and trying to solve problems himself, firsthand. He didn't delegate authority all that well. And the result, of course, is that Fidel could not be everywhere. And so consequently, when he wasn't there to make a decision, the decision didn't get made because no one else felt they had the authority to make the decision.
Fidel Castro is an enormously self-confident man. And he understands who he is, what he wants to do, where he wants to go, and he believes that he can do it. He fails to understand that there are many things he does not know, that there are a great many instances where people do not support him and he will not be able to accomplish his goals.
Fidel undertook one scheme after another. Draining the Zapata swamp, planting a circle of dwarf coffee trees around Havana, creating a new breed of cattle.
Cuba was going to produce more cheese than Switzerland, more meat than France, more milk. So many things that I think that man believed them, because Fidel Castro believes his own words, and that's the most dangerous thing.
As one project faltered, Castro moved on to the next, always looking for the silver bullet. Finally, he turned to sugar, Cuba's traditional crop, and staked his reputation on producing 10 million tons in 1970.
Y que aquí se ha dicho que ni una libra menos de los 10 millones. Ese es el problema. Y hay que repetirlo y ratificarlo. Y sería una vergüenza increíble que nosotros nos fuéramos a quedar por debajo de los 10 millones.
The idea was, in effect, to double the size of the country's sugar harvest. Instead of 10 million, 8.5 million metric tons of sugar were produced in 1970. It was, nonetheless, the largest sugar harvest in Cuban history, but it was a failure because the goal was not achieved and because Cuban resources were destroyed and because the country, instead of free, powerful, and independent, was in a state of virtual collapse.
No voy a andar con rodeos para decirlo. Creo que para mí, igual que para cualquier otro cubano y un grado muy alto, significa realmente algo muy duro. Significa algo muy duro, tal vez más duro que ninguna otra experiencia en la lucha revolucionaria.
The Soviet Union stepped in. Fidel would no longer be allowed to run the economy from his jeep. A powerful council of ministers would make all major decisions in concert with the Soviet bloc. 10,000 Soviet advisors would lend a hand.
Castro presided over the revolution's essential capitulation to Soviet demands, organizational demands, structural demands, foreign policy demands, and perhaps one of the hardest things for Castro to accept was that he agreed to stop criticizing the Soviet Union in any fashion, direct or veiled criticism.
Delighted, Moscow rewarded Cuba with subsidies of up to $6 billion per year.
The economy began to recover through about 1976, 1977. People had a real feeling of hope that the sacrifices of the 1960s were paying off economically.